Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Lucy, say hello. Lucy. Lucy's not going to talk to us today. She's laying on the bed. She's sleeping. So, all right. This is the guest bedroom in our place. So, it's kind of become my default office when I've downsized from 4 bedrooms to 3. So, we're going to jump right in. Today's lesson is on nonverbal communication. I think it's important. It's barely mentioned in other chapters within our text, but I want to take the time to share with you about its importance and go ahead and kind of cover some material on it. And well, that's interesting. It's being difficult today. All right, so two little presentations that I'm going to share with you on nonverbal communication. All right, so the first, let's talk about it. What is nonverbal communication? It's important to have a definition, have something to come back to so that we can kind of have a working point. So, the book definition of nonverbal communication, let's go through it. Nonverbal communication can be defined as using or the use of interacting sets of nonverbal symbols and subsystems and systems by communicators with the systematic encoding and decoding of nonverbal symbols and signs for the purposes of exchanging consensually shared meanings in a specific communicative context. What? Right? What? What? Let me break it down. Nonverbal communication is the part of communication that is not verbal. Now, by not verbal, I mean not necessarily spoken word. My tone and my inflection technically is part of nonverbal communication. My use of my hands, part of nonverbal communication. My pauses, nonverbal communication. My facial expressions, nonverbal communication. So basically, the best way to think about what nonverbal communication is simply things that are not the words we're choosing, but yet we're using this to convey a message. Now, why is this important? And then we're going to talk more about what nonverbal communication is. Nonverbal communication is important, and here are the 6 major reasons. Nonverbal factors are the major determinants of meaning in interpersonal context. Meaning, if your friend says that you ask them, "How are you doing today?" and they said, "Fine." Now, you know that that does not mean fine, right? It means they're doing poorly. They're having a bad day. Yet our word was fine. But our nonverbal communication, our tone and inflection, and our body language, fine. Right? 2 different contrasting communicative strategies, right? We're saying the word fine, which means good. Okay, at least, right? But we're saying it in such a way that everyone knows that we are not fine. So when we're thinking about nonverbal communication, we trust nonverbal communication more than we trust verbal communication. We trust nonverbal communication as the source, the place, the thing that we believe we can put our faith and trust in when we're listening to people. Feelings and emotions are more accurately revealed by the nonverbal communication channel than the verbal means. It's hard to fake things, especially our feelings. our feelings and our emotions tend to give us away in our communication. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The nonverbal portion of communication conveys meanings and intentions that are generally or relatively free of deception and or distortion, meaning it's the truest channel, which is why we believe it, right? Nonverbal cues also serve as metacommunicative functions, which allow us as the speaker to dispense and the receiver to receive high quality communication. Nonverbal cues represent much more of an efficient means of communicating than verbal cues. For instance, think about your friends or a significant other. Can you, and I mean good friends, can you look at your significant other or good friend and without a word, just look at them, look over at someone else you've noticed, get them to look at that person, and then look at your friend again and convey what it is you're feeling without a word, right? Without a word. My wife and I are very good at that. We can look in a direction, look to each other, right? To get their attention. Look back in that direction in a glance, just a glance, and then let the other person look and then make eye contact again and avoid hopefully laughing and or shock or horror. Because again, our nonverbals convey those emotions. So nonverbal cues represent a much more efficient means than communicating than verbal. We don't have to use words at times. We can use that look, that glance, that oh my goodness moment, right? And nonverbal cues represent the most suitable vehicle for suggestion, meaning if you're looking to manipulate an audience, not telling you to manipulate people, but if you're looking to reach them in a way that could put the power of suggestion into their brain, nonverbal cues must match up and be reflective of your speech. Now, I want to talk about the importance of nonverbal communication because many people think, oh my goodness, why are we doing this? It's not really in the book, it's covered in a couple other chapters, but why are we taking a special moment to look at this? And this is one of the areas of expertise. In my degree set, I have my original degree in journalism. Then I have a bachelor's of arts in strategic communications, which is about advertising and corporate communications, the best way to describe it, right? It's about conveying messages on a large scale to large scale audience. Then my master's degree is about narrowing that focus down even further and how to effectively change or alter perceptions within communities, within audiences to better serve the public. And that's kind of like public relations, right? So I've got 3 different degrees where basically, and I also have leadership communication thrown in there as a minor, as well as political science, psychology. I guess I have a fair amount of background when it comes to this. And one of the things I've noticed in one of my big studies when I got my master's degree was looking at that overall importance of nonverbal communication. And I've seen a few different sets of numbers, but the importance of nonverbal communication has not changed dramatically over the last 20 years. It's decreased by about 3% in 20 years, meaning the percentage of meaning that comes from nonverbal communication is now approximately 90%. That's huge. Meaning you're not really listening to my words, you're just feeling it or trying to see if I'm telling you the truth. And where this comes into play is we need to be conscious of the words we say, but also our body language, what we're feeling, what we're showing our audience, right? Because when it comes to nonverbal and verbal messages, if they're contradicting, people will trust the nonverbal message because historically it's been accurate throughout our lives. When our parents said, "I'm not angry with you," and yet they're shaking, right? They're frustrated. They're probably angry with us, right? They're just trying to find a different way to say it because they don't want to upset us in that way, or they don't want to seem unreasonable. We've learned that through time. So when we think about the true definition of nonverbal communication, I want you to think about how you might describe or define nonverbal communication. Take a moment, think about it. It's going to be our question, by the way. And then we're going to ask about its importance for this unit. So, one of the things I want you also to think about is it possible to not communicate? Could you go a whole day without communicating to anyone? I mean, maybe if you locked yourself in a room, didn't talk to anyone, didn't see anyone, didn't text anyone, right? Didn't. And even when you fail to text people and when you fail to respond to people who are trying to find out if you're okay, aren't you communicating something in that moment? Let's blow some minds further. Does a sneeze communicate? I say it does, and here's why. It's nonverbal communication. It's an involuntary action to something that irritated our nose, right? Our sinus passages. It technically tells people around us, hey, either we've got COVID, a cold, sinus problems, or I'm allergic to something around here, right? So it communicates a great deal. If you don't believe a sneeze communicates something right now, I want you to go into Walmart today. I want you to go in and I want you to find the most crowded aisle in the store, walk midway down that aisle, and then let out a big fake sneeze. See how people respond to you. Because we're all conditioned with COVID now that a sneeze can mean danger. So that sneeze does communicate something to someone, right? What about a yawn? I can tell you what a yawn means to an audience or to a, I mean, an audience yawn means to a speaker. As a speaker, when I see someone in my audience yawn, I hope that they didn't get a good night's sleep because otherwise I'm probably boring them, right? That's where I'm thinking. It's a nonverbal, and yet I'm still thinking that. Are you still communicating even while you're sleeping? I challenge you that you are. If you can, record yourself sleeping. My guess is at some point during probably your REM sleep, deep in dream, you're going to mumble, get frustrated, or something will happen in your dream, or you may laugh, or you may have some involuntary body movements. And any of those things can be communicating a message to someone else that views it, that sees it. My wife actually talks in her sleep, which is weird because then I have to figure out if it's a real message, real communication to me, or if it was just something she's dreaming about in that moment. And usually I just wait till morning to discuss that because it's not worth having the discussion, waking someone up and then they don't even know what you're talking about because it was a dream. So let's talk about some other things. Let's talk about the study of the body because I think most of us have heard about this, especially those in the medical or some of the people who study sports or involved in sports. What is kinesthetics? When we think about this, it's the study of body movement. And it is considered to be an intelligent way of communication because our body reflects emotion. Our body reflects our energy. Our body reflects what we're truly feeling. And the study of the way in which our body moves and way in which we gesture is truly nonverbal communication study. Okay. So that's why I brought that up. Now, I mentioned something earlier, signs and symbols. Now, I'm also going to throw in one more, rituals. So, we're going to talk about some things that are nonverbal many times and their importance in our lives. So, when we think about signs, signs are natural, intrinsic representations of something. For instance, we involuntarily cry if we're really, really sad, right? How about if we eat something disgusting? Ugh, right? That whole ugh, and we back up even. We get away from it. We don't even mean to. It just happens. Shock. Our mouth drops open, right? So these are involuntary signs. Symbols are what we arbitrarily assigned as representations of things. For instance, mm, or thumbs up, like. My goodness, thumbs up's been supplanted by like, right? And then we have rituals. Rituals are behaviors that are not completely natural, nor completely arbitrary. I put an example here, and then I'm going to talk about another example. So, one of my examples is expressing joy about socks that your grandmother knitted you for Christmas, right? Now, joy is a natural emotion, but we're using it in this case a little bit strategically or fake, meaning it's symbolic. Oh, grandma, thanks for the socks, right? Always need socks, unless you sincerely mean it, because most people are just like not thrilled about getting a pair of socks, especially if they're knitted. When we think about other rituals around us, some people might be part of the Masons, some people are part of an organized religion. Every religion, every group has some sort of ritual or symbolic things going on, right? They're not completely natural, but they're not completely arbitrary. They're kind of something we follow. And my perfect example is if you've ever had the opportunity to go to a Catholic wedding and it's a full mass wedding, you'll see what I mean. It follows an extreme ritual presence. They go through several rituals during that ceremony that are intrinsic to the Catholic faith. Right? I'm not saying you should be Catholic, I'm not saying anything, but it's a perfect example. Go to a political rally. You may hear chants like, you know, way to go, Brandon, or you may hear chants with, I don't know, chants about Trump, right? You may hear pro Biden chants. I don't know. Because a political rally has a different idea, meaning you're going to hear the pro of whatever party you're at, right? So if I'm at the Democratic Party, you're probably going to hear down with Trump or who knows what. I have no idea because I haven't been to any political parties in the last 6 years because, quite honestly, I'm kind of over all of it. And this is from a person who's worked for political parties for part of their life, both sides, Republican and Democrat. I'm fair game. I'm a gun for hire, is what I tell people sometimes, you know. And because of my experience and expertise in crisis communication, in public relations, and in public speaking, and especially in nonverbal communication, since I'm highly certified in all of those fields, I do get tasked at times for political parties. And I may not even be the party I affiliate with, but yet I will do my best to help them for money. Okay. When we think about nonverbal skills, I've kind of shown you some importance, right? I've given you pause and time to think about nonverbal communication and why it's important. Now, do you know anyone that communicates really well nonverbally? And then the second part of that question, what do you think makes them so skilled? And it's this easy answer. I talked about this early in the class, back in chapter 2. Emotional intelligence, having empathy, social skills, and expressiveness, as well as self monitoring, And it doesn't hurt if you throw in some charisma, right? Those are highly sought after traits. I'm not here to teach you those, unfortunately, guys. I'm sorry. If we ever go to if we go to a public speaking too, or bring in some other classes that I'm thinking about teaching, uh, then I would probably cover more about emotional intelligence. But we like people who are emotionally intelligent. And it doesn't mean they're bright. It doesn't mean they scored really well on the SAT or ACT. It means that they can read a room and understand how to interact with people. It also means usually that they have nonverbal sensitivity and nonverbal expressivity, meaning they can express their feelings by looking, by showing emotion through feeling, by showing emotion through nonverbal channels. Now, who tends to be better at nonverbal communication? That's a good question, right? And usually, when we think about people who are good at nonverbal communication, we might think about pastors or sometimes teachers. We may think about like a drama teacher, especially, would probably be really up there. Psychiatrists, sometimes, psychologists, occasionally, generally, salespeople, right? They're extroverts. They're able to express themselves. They usually have high self esteem and they're empathetic, meaning they can relate to people. For us guys, sorry, women tend to be more skilled at this than men. I'm an exception to a rule. I score very highly. For a man, exceptionally high. And I think it's because I've taken the time to understand people, or try to. And I look at each individual as an individual. You're my student, but you're also a person. And you're going through different things. Every one of us is going through something different. I started this lesson about 40 minutes later than I wanted to because I was dealing with work related issues. You would think that 50 hours at a work week would be enough for a company, but no, problems still exist. Therefore, we have to fix them. That's what happens when you start to get VP titles and things like that. It gets to be a pain. But ultimately, women tend to be more skilled because they just tend to be more in tune with emotion. Men have been trained, unfortunately, through years to be less attached to emotion. I can give you lots of reasons why. There's lots of psychological studies. Some people say it was because you know, governments trained us to go to war. We were trained to go to the fields and work and not complain, right? I mean, it starts way back. So it is what it is. But these are general averages. Two-thirds of women are way more skilled than most men. 80% of men. Two-thirds of women are more skilled than 80% of men in emotional intelligence. Excuse me. When we think about, like I said, mentioned earlier, salespeople generally are better at this. Also, age has a bearing. Now, interestingly enough, I'm starting to slide on the wrong side of the scale because when we're young, we have no emotional intelligence. We demand things. Give me more. I want, right? As we age, we start to develop that. And by our 30s, we get really good, at least as good as we're going to get, at our emotional intelligence. And we carry that through our 40s. And somewhere by mid 50s, we start to slide. Thank goodness I'm not there yet. But I'm looking at that precipice coming in a few years. So when we think about that, and I think many of you, especially those who have been in medicine and have ever worked in an elder care facility, you'll know what I mean. Because by the time we get to 70, we really start to revert back to the childhood me, mine, I want, I need. And that carries through our demise to our age of death. We tend to be that way. Now, I said tend. There are exceptions to every rule. But a great aunt who was an amazing individual. And she kept her emotional intelligence till the very end. She died at 98 years old. She was always taking time to talk to others because you know what she had? Time. She didn't have a job. She's retired, right? 98 years old. She's in a nursing home, right? What's she going to do? Sit around and watch TV? Not really. Not her cup of tea. She'd read books and she would talk to people. She would call people on the phone. Hey, I hear you're having a bad time. Not a gossip hour type call, but like sincerely. Hey, you want to talk about it? I'm 98 years old. I've been through a few things, but I'll never tell you I've been through what you're going through right now because it's yours. She took the time to listen, to speak and listen. She was an excellent she had excellent emotional intelligence and was a great nonverbal communicator. My own grandmother, not so much. By the time she got to 80, it was all downhill from there. She was very demanding, and every year she got more demanding, and it was just rough because there was no understanding for, you know, someone working a work week and then not being able to get over there with some groceries and the proper time. Lord forbid you were an hour late because you had work meetings and it went over. The point is, it's something we can learn to be better at. It's something that's very important to communication. And it's something that maybe some of us might be slightly born with, but again, we can do and get better. And I'm going to show you some methods to utilize within public speaking to get better at it. Repeating. When we use nonverbal cues to reiterate verbal communications, repeating an idea or a thought or significance. And I'll show you some examples. When your significant other or friend asks if you're wanting pizza for dinner, you first do this. Then you say no. It's repeating. You're actually using nonverbal first, verbal second. If you ask a stranger in a foreign country what time it is and you do the typical, right? The stranger may not understand English, but they understand what you're trying to convey. Remember, repeating is sequential, not at the same time. This is a tactic you can use in your speech to get people to jump on board, get people to understand what it is you're saying, what you're believing, what you're feeling, and start to lead them to agreement. Contradictory. Now, this one's slightly different, but you probably guessed from the title what it means. Nonverbal cues can signal the opposite of what words mean, meaning what I did earlier. How are you doing? Fine. Right? It's mixed signals, and we trust the nonverbal channel, not the verbal channel. So remember that. When you say no, but your body says yes, right? Or you stifle a yawn, oh, that's fascinating. Oh, yeah, that was fascinating. Hopefully, my class is not that. Complimenting. This is a big one, and we do this one without thinking. All of these we do without thinking many times, but this one is really, really important in public speaking. You may use with nonverbal cues the nonverbal to go with the verbal to complement or reinforce our words. Think about our parents when they yelled at us and pointed their finger. By the way, in speeches, don't point your finger. It's rude, right? Or when I ask you in this class, so do you understand now? Or I ask you a question and you nod your head, right? And you don't even think about it. I can't see you nod your head. I wish I could, but I can't. So there you are, nodding your head and saying yes. Now, sometimes we substitute. And this one's used a lot in sports. Let's be fair. For those who are very sports oriented. We use nonverbal cues as a replacement for our words. We may use the choke sign because you failed to score, you failed to achieve your goal. Or sometimes you might see the state bird of New York as you're driving down the road and somebody gets mad at you and they flip you off, right? Those are substituting. They're not actually saying it. Maybe they are saying it. Maybe they're doing complimenting. They're literally holding up their finger while they're saying the phrase, right? That would be complimenting. But substituting is where we just don't even say any words. We just use the nonverbal. Stop, right? When we think about accenting or moderating our speech with nonverbals, they can amplify or get more done. For instance, our body language, when we see someone we like, we don't even think about this. We tend to lean towards the person we like. Think about it. We position our body in such a way it flatters ourselves. We don't think about it many times, right? We avert eye contact a bit, but not too much because we want that person to notice us, right? So when we think about accenting, I put a picture up there of one of the best at it. I think about Joey. Hey, how you doing, right? For those who've watched Friends, they know what I'm talking about. The man turns on the switch, right? He literally turns on the switch. Don't worry, I've seen women do it too. Flip your hair, play in your hair a little bit while you're looking at a guy. It makes us feel important. It makes us clued in. We watch that nonverbal. We don't even think about it. And we're sucked in. It's how it works. Kids also use them, screaming and crying. I saw one in Walmart the other day. Picking on Walmart today. I don't know why. Kid threw a temper tantrum right in the middle of the aisle. He wanted a toy, evidently. Parents weren't getting him the toy. He threw a fit. We've seen it before. It gets the point across, doesn't it? Right? When we think about other things like regulating, which is making and breaking eye contact, we do this one a lot when we're in a conversation to kind of show turn taking, meaning you've said something, now I want to say something. And it's basically the use of nonverbal cues to cut in or interrupt a conversation, perhaps. Right? We lean forward, we might, and then start talking, re interject. Also, regulating can mean something different. And I've had this one happen, but I've also done this to my wife, so we can share this one back and forth. When a conversation's getting heated or a disagreement type situation is occurring, and someone goes up, the significant other goes up, touches somebody to, hey, break the conversation, break off. No good can come of this, right? It's a calm down moment, right? Get away. Regulating. I'm not going to make you do the quiz, but if you want to, again, look at the quiz. You can do it. I'll give you, I'm not going to make you turn it into me, but I want to see how well you do with these. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I will give you let's give you 7 minutes to read each one and try to figure out which one goes with which one. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you only have 6 answers, which means one of them is going to be repeated. So I'm going to let you kind of work through that. Name the function. Name the function. And then I'm going to disclose the answers. 6 more minutes. Five minutes left. Two minutes left. $30 seconds left. So, answers. Number one, complimenting. Now, if she didn't mail the words call me, it would be substituting. Okay. So that one's the trickiest one of the bunch. Number two, contradicting. Number three, substituting. Number four, repeating. Number five, extending. Number six, contradicting. And number seven, regulating. Okay. One more PowerPoint to share. I'm going to talk about a little bit more about nonverbal communication and its importance. So again, nonverbal has power. That's why we're talking about it. I'm going to talk about this one. We're going to talk about some misnomers or misconceptions about nonverbal communication because some of you might have thought, oh, I've seen this before. I've heard some of this before. Don't Lie to Me or something like that, the TV show. There's been other ones out there. But the myth is that you could read a person like a book, and honestly, you cannot. You totally cannot do that. Nonverbal cues are perceivable and interpretable, but not necessarily read. Meaning, body language, it is misleading. Nonverbal communication isn't a language at all. It has no grammar, it has no syntax. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Because if you could read people like a book, or if people could read other people like a book, No one would ever be able to lie to each other. Poker players would be out of a job. Undercover cops, well, they'd be dead. And relationships ultimately would be damaged or destroyed. There's not a one-to-one correspondence between specific nonverbal cues and their meanings 100% of the time. For instance, direct eye contact is a perfect example. If you're getting made direct eye contact by someone, it could be a sign of hostility or could be a sign of attraction. How do you know which one is which, right? You have to look at other nonverbal cues and or their language and or how their body is positioned to you. When we think about nonverbal behavior, it's idiosyncratic, meaning it varies from person to person to person. Some people don't realize how much eye contact they're making with others. Others don't realize they hardly make eye contact at all. Let's look at the idea of a smile. And let's talk about a smile. Let's look at these smiles and try to figure out what these smiles mean. I'll let you look at them. Let's start with Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa, upper left, right? Mona Lisa is a coy smile, a secretive smile. The I know something that you don't know smile. Smile number 2, top middle. That's a frustrated smile. I've been caught at the airport trying to get away from the interviewer. Smile number 3, top row. I've been caught as I'm trying to go to an event and I don't really have the time or desire to talk to the paparazzi. Let's go down to Bill Maher, down there, bottom row, left-hand side. That's the I don't really care smile. And you know, we've all seen that one before. And it's done. Then we go to one to the right, which is obviously a fake smile. Forced. Yay! Of course, I'm putting a smile on my face. Yay! Right? Then we have Johnny Depp with I told you I wasn't going to answer any questions about this, and you asked me anyway smile. Notice he's also touching his head, trying to think of his way out of it. And then poor Britney Spears just got out of the car and then screamed, "Hey, Britney," and she turned and smiled. It's fake and slightly aggressive, meaning she was startled. So see, smiles can even mean different things. Myth number 2 about nonverbal communication is it does not have a powerful impact on communication, and that's bull. We talked about it earlier. In the 1960s, 93% of meaning or impact is communicated non-verbally on studies. These were 10-year studies, by the way, 50s to 60s. Interestingly enough, from 2005 to 2015, a similar study was done. 90% of meaning or impact is still communicated non-verbally. And then we have the Mayor Harabin study, which was done in the 70s and then again in the 80s. And I believe someone's conducting it now, but I think they took a hiatus on it because of COVID. It kind of jacked up everything, right? But this study is based on trying to look at where we convey emotion. And face conveys 55% of emotional meaning in a sentence or a message or speech. Vocal cues contain only 38%, and honestly, the words chosen, only 7%. So it's kind of powerful. Nonverbal communication is important. But then when we look at it and flip it from the other side, you can't just say that language isn't important because if we watched a foreign film with no subtitle, would we understand 93% of it? No. If police were investigating a crime and the only witness was a mime, would they get 93% of the information they needed to arrest someone? No. If you were watching a stand, and if you really want to put it to the test, I challenge you to do this one. Watch a stand-up comedian on mute. No, no words on the screen. Do you think that comedian will be funny? Myth number 3. Nonverbal behavior is genuine, spontaneous, and natural. It goes from the idea of we cannot hide our emotions or our feelings. Now, while nonverbal communication is reflexive, meaning it shows some of our emotions, people sometimes can hide some of it. But we can never hide 100% of it. Right? We leak nonverbal cues. I was in a conversation with an employer one time, and I'm trying to think of the nicest way to say this. There's a reason why I teach and I go back to teaching after working in my field. I worked in my field for a few years, and then I'll jump back in to teaching full time. And there's a reason I choose to do that, and that's because many of the people that I partner with, right, so that I work under as a VP, many of those presidents are not the nicest people. You don't generally get to be multimillionaires and the president of a company by being Mr. Nice Guy. All right. And what I found was, since I have a great deal of emotional intelligence, sometimes I would become the target, even though it wasn't about me. I could turn around and become the target of their aggression for a moment. And I didn't like that. I don't choose for that. I don't really want to be a human punching bag any more than anyone else, right? Or a verbal punching bag any more than anyone else. So I learned to do something, and I'm quite good at it. My wife still tells me I'm good at it. I can have the most blank and vacant look on my face so that you will have no idea what I'm really feeling. And the only reason I say that is because occasionally I forget and I turn that look on for her. It's not great for a relationship, folks, but it is great for self preservation against mean people. So, in the end, even though I have a blank look, I still leak clues to what I'm feeling in that moment. And in this little slide, it talks about crossed arms generally means people are closed off, not receptive to a message. If we cross our legs, we're wanting out of the situation, or we're, again, not receptive. If our feet are pointing towards the door of our room right now, it means we'd rather be somewhere else. Head down, moving your upper body forward, tends to be aggressive. Hands on the hips. Is that indifferent? What does it mean? For every person, it means something slightly different. Okay, something slightly different. So there is no true 100%, I can guarantee you, moment. The reality of nonverbal communication is it's powerful. We trust it inherently. It conveys much of our emotional and affective meaning. But there can be contradictions between how people, like for me, I tend to cross my arms as I'm actually listening and I'm getting comfortable. It's a comfortable position because I have a rotator cuff tear on my right arm from playing baseball, and now I have 2 bone spurs on that same arm. And so it takes pressure off that arm, meaning it doesn't hurt as much and I can listen better. Imagine that pain is a deterrent to listening, right? Just like hunger is. So nonverbal cues, my crossing of the arm doesn't mean I'm not interested at all. And quite honestly, it means that I am interested. I'm trying to take pain away out of the equation so I can 100% listen to a message. Nonverbal cues also will convey what we're feeling: mad, angry, upset, frustrated, annoyed, right? But they also can show a conflicting side if we choose to be deceptive. Words provide a more subtle and nuanced expression of our feeling. We might be furious, we might be peeved or irate, livid, frustrated, outraged, right? Pissed off, infuriated. So both the two work together. Nonverbal communication operates at a low level awareness or completely unconsciously. We don't many times think about our nonverbal communication. Nonverbal behavior is also could be considered conscientious and strategic. Think about when we fake laugh or we act like we're interested, right? Most people consider themselves to be a good judge of emotion, but the reality number 4 comes into play. Nonverbal cues are culturally universal. People like to assume that it's part of human nature. And there are certain ones that are universal: anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, surprise, and contempt. Those are the only ones that are universal. Sarcasm is not universal, and many of us are really good at sarcasm. When we think about these faces, they mean different things, and yet I look at them and you're like, what do they mean, right? The ultimate universal feeling, nonverbal communication, feeling emotion that's portrayed, happiness. True happiness, we generally have pretty much the same thing going on. We tend to smile, our eyes narrow, and we are genuinely happy. Fear and disgust, most often we confuse those. Sarcastic smile, though, is a blended one and it's very cultural. It's very American, unfortunately. You know, when we think about these things, gender differences come into play, where we grew up, what region of the country we even grew up comes into play. So there is no pure way to read nonverbals and say that you're reading someone like a book. Number 5, you can spot a liar based on their nonverbal cues. They take too long to answer. No, please stop. Please stop. They're lies. Those TV shows like Lie to Me or Casino Royale, you can't read people. You can guess and maybe right. Cops vastly overestimate their deception detection skills rather. In reality, cops and college students are able to find a lie about 62% of the time. That's not amazing scores, right? That's kind of towards the middle of the road. Cops and college students can find a lie 62% of the time. You guys are the best at it. And the reason being, because you guys tend to have people lie to you. College students, you may have other students lie to you, right? Cops generally have criminals lie to them. Jurors always overestimate their deception detection skills. He was had to be guilty. He sat there like completely emotionless. But who knows what was going on in that person's brain? If I were accused of something I didn't do, I would probably, after a couple outbursts of saying I didn't do it, I'd probably sit there quietly because I don't want to be held in contempt of court and go to prison and or convicted for something I didn't do, right? When people avoid their gaze doesn't necessarily mean that they're lying to you. If they shift their position in a chair, it could be the chair's uncomfortable. That's where I'm at today. I have the most uncomfortable IKEA chair I'm sitting in. It is horrible. I'm getting rid of it. I'm totally getting rid of it after this lesson. And then we pick on people because they didn't respond to us quickly enough. Sometimes people just don't hear us. Sometimes they had to remember what they were doing. Because if you ask me, what did you have for dinner 2 nights ago? Ooh, I'm going to take a minute to think about it because quite honestly, I don't remember. And that's just 2 days ago. On average, people are 54% accurate in detecting lies, deception, lies. Cops and college students, I mentioned that earlier. Most of those common signs that I talked about are really not great at trying to figure out who's lying to you or not. And liars never look up and to the left as a consistent basis. It's just lie to me. Please. That whole idea of NLP, it's totally unreliable. So that said, I've told you that communication is powerful. I've told you that we overestimate communication as well, right? Nonverbal communication is important. And we think we're awesome at it. But the truth is, we can always be better. Remember to use some of those strategies, like I talked to about complimenting, especially in your speech, because it will help the viewer really get something more out of it. Okay. That said, I'll be posting the questions for this chapter soon. Hope you guys have a great time. If you're having difficulty or not understanding something, please send me an email. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Bye.